when you play a game that doesn't have combos, you really start thinking about the inescapable situations. I said it when I announced this stream, where I'm like, combos get all the attention in the fighting game community. Almost invariably, you see some kind of like exchange that leads to a big badass combo, right? Combo videos, the clips on Twitter. That's what so much of this stuff revolves around. A new game comes out and it's a slew of, max resource touch of death combos that are largely impractical in a lot of ways, right? But it's fun, it's interesting, it's entertaining. I love that stuff. So much of fighting games is the other stuff. It is the, what is your Oki? How do you loop your pressure? How do you apply pressure in different situations to get the advantage? How do you create situations that are really hard to escape for your opponent, right? And I think when you start playing a game that doesn't have combos, you start thinking about that immediately, right? My immediate thing was like, well, how would I do something that is kind of like a combo, right? And it's like, it's Oki. That's what I'm looking for, right? It's the wake-up pressure. So can I put them in a situation where they get knocked down and they have to respond, so that even I know that the only thing my opponent can now do on wake-up is dash to avoid, right? And I found a situation where I don't think they can avoid it at all, and if I loop it a second time, they will be able to avoid it, but they're forced to. They're forced to dodge in some direction. And suddenly it narrows down the space. And like those interactions, like that process of like figuring it out, like if you've played a fighting game and you've hit the point where you're like, I know I am inside my opponent's head, right? It's because you're controlling the situation in a certain way that allows you to relatively easily predict what your opponent. So you're like, you're gonna jump because everything I did made you say, my smartest move is to jump. But guess what? There's just enough of a gap that I'm gonna knock you out of the air, right? That is the beauty of fighting games for me personally, and I think for a lot of people when it gets down to it, but the outward expression of it tends to be a lot of combo stuff. It tends to be the big flashy stuff that, makes a splash. So it's important to play these different types of games, if only to kind of recalibrate the way that you think. It's actually something that helped me a lot when I wanted to be a competitive fighting game player. If you find yourself playing a game and being like, I'm not able to react to my opponents, man. Like, they're always ready. I'm never fast enough. Maybe you need to play a different type of game to kind of train your skills and train your brain into being able to really grasp what those things are and to increase your aptitude with them, right? So I remember when I was playing a lot of Street Fighter 4 when it came out. I wanted to be competitive at Street Fighter 4. And I saw that where I was like, man, people are reacting. They just like, they're at a different speed than I am, right? Their brain is playing on super turbo mode. That's how it works. I went and I started playing BlazBlue, and BlazBlue is such a faster paced game and requires so much more quick thinking. It has very quick scenarios. The movement is way faster than Street Fighter 4. And I started training myself on that, and then my brain got used to that speed of play, and it actually, what it did is increased my mental stack, or reduced the stress of the mental stack, or increased my mental bandwidth, right? And it's because I played this different style of game, right? And once you start learning that, playing BlazBlue at that speed and taking it back to Street Fighter 4, suddenly I'm processing the fireball pressure from Shoto's way better. Suddenly I'm understanding the mix-ups from Ibuki way easier because I'm used to the fast-paced mix-ups of BlazBlue now, right? And it was only by going into those different styles of games that really taught me how to learn other things, right? And I found that again when I started playing Fantasy Strike, where Fantasy Strike is still a fast-paced game, but it's a very different style of game. The exchanges work differently. It prioritizes different skill sets and different aspects of the fighting game interactions. And that really helped me going back to play games like Marvel, where I understood things like looped pressure a little bit more because I was forced into these loop pressure situations round after round after round with a much higher round count in Fantasy Strike, which kind of gave me the ability to understand other games in different ways. I don't know, man. That's what I'm all about, and I hope y'all get a bit of that too when it comes to playing these games. Hypergraph saying that multiple game specialists are the smartest players, and I think you're absolutely right. Part of playing all these different games helps train different bits of aptitude. So there's a lot of transferable skills in fighting games. Smart players who play a lot of games will be able to make those connections and like port over abilities basically and knowledge bases that help them a lot in other games. And you see that in the best of the best. Oftentimes they are very proficient in many games. Ah, yes, so for you, Grav, right? The skill you built in Fantasy Strike was learning how to force true mix-ups. Absolutely. There's a little bit of, like, I think defense feels very strong in Fantasy Strike, in part because of the way the mix-up work. So you don't have high lows, so you really have to build in this strike throw special or strike throw right left, right? And it shifts what you're focusing on when you're doing your mix-ups. And for a lot of people, that helps them learn, where they're like, oh, I get it now, right? I'm facing a rook. Fundamentally, I have to understand that special, throw, and strike are 3 different threats that work in 3 different ways, but they all impact each other. And learning how that circle of impact works and that, like, that decision-making process work is really important. I think Fantasy Strike does a particularly good job of doing that, despite the fact that it actually handles regular throws in a very odd way in terms of throw teching. But that's another conversation, maybe. Yeah, you think Fantasy Strike might lack a range of risk-reward? For sure. I think that's kind of the curse of the approachable or the simplified fighting game, is that there's fewer of those. It tends to strip away some of those considerations, and as you strip more of them away, the way risk-reward works gets skewed. So it's either skewed heavily in one direction or it's not. Yeah, it lacks a range, right? That's it. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It lacks a range of risk-reward. It's not that the risk-reward isn't there. It's not that it's not interesting or valuable. But the range of it, the spectrum, isn't as broad as other games.